Like all things, I am super late to the party. Iceberg videos, as you may have seen on YouTube, are videos explaining these types of images. Photos of icebergs with text on them, all focused on information relating to certain topics. The stuff at the top is common knowledge for the most part, but like an iceberg, the information gets more obscure the farther it goes down. If you have watched even one of these on YouTube, then you know how easy it is to fall into a whole rabbit hole of these things, or I guess more accurately, to find yourself in a virtual Antarctica. These were popular a few months ago, and every video I see talking about these things talks about how it's like a long dead meme. So, like the millennial that I am, I'm here late to beat an overused meme format to the ground to talk about this one, the Neopets iceberg. I actually saw one on the Neopets Reddit a bit ago, but when I searched for it, I found an updated version with some more cool bits of trivia and an explanation. So first of all, I have to thank D Cathartic for making it, as well as for providing context underneath it for some of those that I had less knowledge of. There was one or two that I didn't know about at all. Okay, so this is going to be a long one. Like, seriously, I try and provide context for everyone, even those with only the barest minimum of Neopets knowledge. So grab a snack, grab a drink, load up a shop to restock or something, because we're checking out the Neopets iceberg. Jelly World is a rumor and maybe even a hoax. People say it's a secret world not listed on the Neopian world map. It's supposedly accessible by typing in the URL into your browser, but obviously that's ridiculous because a world made out of jelly would be impossible. Just kidding. Jelly World, aside from being a secret world that houses like a couple of games and a free food source, the giant jelly, is also a sort of meme or inside joke within the Neopets community. Everyone just claims it's not real, and that's the joke. In 2007, Neopets was shaking things up and wanted to add customization to their site, allowing users to dress up their pets. However, there was a problem. Many of the painted pets had different art, with poses that vary wildly between colors. Obviously, that made clothing those pets with different poses more difficult. In order to fix this, Neopets decided to update all of the pet art, standardizing the poses. This was hugely divisive, as many players felt that the new art lacked the charm of the old art, even as the idea of customization remained popular. Starting on April 27, 2007, some Neopians with certain pet color combinations were allowed to choose whether or not to convert their pets. The unconverted pets would not be able to be customized, but they had the benefit of being sort of special. Those that remained unconverted are some of the most sought after and desired things in the game. A market has grown up just around the trading of UC pets, and getting an unconverted Dreamy remains the end goal for many players. Remember UC pets. These are going to be the root of a lot of later entries. I actually have a whole video about this topic if you're interested, so I'm just going to be brief here. Neopets Mobile was a service offered by T-Mobile starting in 2006 and ending in 2010. Players could pay a subscription for access to Lutari Island, a mobile-only land. It offered extremely limited Neopets gameplay, such as feeding your pets, quests, a wheel, and some minigames. It is best known for being the only place to get a Lutari, an otter-like pet that cannot be traded or put into the pound. Lutari Island and the ability to create Lutari on it disappeared in 2010 when they closed down Neopets Mobile, so now the only way to get a Lutari is by creating it on its pet day. This is an acronym that stands for No Thank You, Good Luck Trading. It's a commonly used phrase on the pound board where people trade Neopets. It's kind of a meme within the community where people will use it even outside of transactions to describe, like, not liking something. For example, Blummeroo steak for dinner again? No thank you, good luck trading. The Lutari paintbrush was a paintbrush awarded rarely from various activities on Lutari Island on Neopets Mobile. It was presumably going to paint pets a Lutari Island color similar to the art design of the pets used in promotional images. However, no colors were ever attached to them, so now they're just useless but interesting items floating around the site. Neopets need to be fed, and if they are not, they go through various stages of hunger before reaching the final stage, dying. Though Neopets cannot actually die from this, they will stay at this stage for the rest of their existence or until someone feeds them. This is a popular joke even outside of the active player base, as many people of a certain age have pets that they haven't fed or even thought about in years. It pops up all the time in memes, and it was most recently used in some new officially licensed Hot Topic merch. These were two popular games that were purged when Jumpstart bought Neopets and took over the servers. I believe the destruction of KeyQuest was an accident, but I've never heard the same said of Habitarium. Habitarium was basically a city building game with the main gameplay loop being to gather resources and then spend it to build better structures and upgrade your environment. Players had to take care of the pets, who they had to feed and keep safe from bad bugs who would occasionally attack your little colony. And yes, pets are pets for your pets, which are, of course, pets for your pets. You know, it makes sense. KeyQuest was an online multiplayer board game. It was this really cool game that basically deserves its own video, but a basic rundown was that it was kind of like Mario Party, but with keys instead of stars. Players moved around a virtual board, and there were these mini games, and it was super fun. Users could collect player tokens, which affected gameplay as well as their game figure. Many have never recovered from its removal, especially as it's never been clear whether they intend to bring it back or not. The KeyQuest board remains on the Neo boards to this day. Probably one of the more popular did you knows about Neopets is that at one point a group of Scientologists played a major role in investing in the site. During an AMA, one of the site's founders, Donna, admitted that they didn't know anything about Scientology at the time and called herself and Adam, her co-founder, totally naive. The company was mainly unaffected by the Scientologists' involvement. Donna says that the company was run like a Scientology org, which are known for being very structured with a strict hierarchy. She says that at one point they did want to put Scientology onto the site in some way, but that she and Adam shut that down immediately, and nothing like that ever made it online. This is, I kid you not, basically a screamer that is hosted on Neopets.com. Located in Tyrania, it was a page with a flash file that features a pterodactyl attacking the player suddenly, jumping out from the screen, like right at you. The Wheel of Monotony has a chance to take players there automatically, startling the unprepared. This refers to a couple of somewhat infamous site malfunctions. One of the most known of these was in 2015 when Jumpstart's profanity filter went down along with their moderation tools. The profanity filter regulated everything from the naming of Neopets to the Neo boards, and so for one wild weekend, players ran roughshod with the ability to name their Neopets things like cocksucker. The team was unable to moderate this behavior, resulting in some of the most shocking and funniest screenshots ever taken on Neopets. While officially this was due to a server migration issue, rumors abounded that Jumpstart had simply fired the remaining moderation team in order to save money. This only added to the feeling of ill will toward Jumpstart that existed at the time. In the 2000s, print media still wasn't quite dead, so for nearly 5 years, an official Neopets magazine was published. I remember them being kind of hard to find. I know that I bought the first issue from Limited 2, which sold other Neopets merch, but I don't know where else they were available. The magazine had articles on the lore of Neopets, pet spotlights, games, and like science experiments you could do, and just like a whole bunch of ads. They advertised their own tie-in products as well as other advertising partners that they promoted on the site. A total of 26 magazines were published, and they're fairly popular with Neo collectors. Fairies are a race of creatures that inhabit Neopia and are some of the only remaining humanoid-style characters on the site. They play multiple important roles in site features, and some of them are deeply involved in certain event plots. However, they seem to be a race made up entirely of women. However, unknown to some, there are 2 known instances of male fairies. The first, the Happiness Fairy, is a character who seems to have been invented by Dr. Sloth and is really just the guy himself running around and spreading weirdly cheerful joy. This also appeared in the Gallery of Heroes at one point. The second was an April Fool's Day joke that ran on Facebook in 2012. Users could vote for the very first male fairy out of a selection of 5. Not surprisingly, the 5th fairy won, but his final version ended up looking quite a bit different from his sketch. Treasure Keepers was a Facebook game started in 2011 by Meteor Games, a game company founded by Adam and Donna, the original founders of Neopets. Though it was not hosted on Neopets, it was an official tie-in game. Users played as one of 2 characters who run a shop for adventurers. The goal of the game was to sell items to customers and buy upgrades and new decorations for your shop, a type of gameplay that was popular in the early 2010s on Facebook. Items for the shop were obtained by playing through dungeons, board game style maps that required some luck to get through successfully. Players had stats that were weighted against the different tiles they landed on, and if they failed enough times, they would be kicked from the dungeon with no rewards. Players could also equip one of a number of pet pets that were available, each raising a specific stat. This game unfortunately did not appear to be very popular, and because of some behind-the-scenes issues, Meteor Games was forced to let 90% of their staff go. Due to this, Treasure Keeper was shut down only a few months after its launch. Players at the time received a code that they could trade in for 10,000 Neopoints and a couple of rare items. For a number of years after it released, the purple color was not completely purple. Pets painted this color also had a number of orange spots in various locations depending on the pet. For a long time, this was just completely unexplained, and Neopians were left to wonder. Then, in 2008, the orange spots were removed. There was no in-universe explanation for this, but there are a few theories. 2008 saw the release of the plot The Return of Dr. Sloth. This was originally scheduled to be released in 2004, but due to some scheduling conflicts, it was pushed back by nearly 4 years. The plot is a popular fan favorite, but there's way too much to get into here, although I do plan on making a video about it sometime. The main thing you need to know is that during the plot, a major event is attempting to unite two warring factions of Grundos, these like weird little alien pet guys, the purple Grundos and the orange Grundos. An evil split Grundo Parallax was playing both sides of the conflict, pitting them against each other in order to undermine any attempts against the villain Sloth. In the end, after disposing of Parallax, the two brothers on opposing sides finally came back together and bring their groups to unity. According to the AMA with Adam and Donna, in the original plot, Parallax, or I don't know, a different purple Grundo, had been left with an orange scar after a childhood dispute. This orange scar on the purple Grundo was supposed to explain why purple pets had orange spots. Even though this went unexplained in the released version of the plot, the orange spots were still removed by its conclusion. This was a page on Neopets that could be found on the featured news page. It displayed a quote-unquote live feed of the Neopets office, giving players a glimpse into the day-to-day of the Neopets team. I say quote-unquote live feed because, in the early 2000s, webcams were much more primitive than they are today, and what the Neocam really showed was a single image capture of the office at a particular time. Users could refresh the page to get a new snapshot every 15 seconds or so, though sometimes the camera was turned off. When that happened, it simply showed the last recorded snapshot. Sometimes the Neocam was off for long stretches of time, like when the team was out of the office for the holidays. In 2007, when Neopets was bought by Viacom, the Neocam stopped updating entirely. It's been confirmed by a member of the Neopets team that as more staff was added, it became an issue of consent. They just couldn't ask every person, "Are you cool with us possibly recording you as you go about your day?" The page is still available for viewing on Neopets though, along with an archive of random photos from around the office, giving a peek into the day-to-day lives of TNT during a certain window of time. Popular for a brief period of time, browser-based chat games existed throughout the aughts and early 2010s. The most well-known of this genre was undoubtedly Club Penguin, but Petpet Park, which followed in its footsteps, has a loyal cult following even to this day. Petpet Park was a standalone browser-based game with a multiplayer focus. Player could care for one of 9 pet pets, none of which was actually available on Neopets proper, and dress them up, feed them, and play games. However, the main focus of the game was the multiplayer chat aspect. The pet pets essentially served as avatars for the players, who could visit different map screens to chat and hang out with others on the site. The tie-in to the Neopets main site was pretty minimal. There was a mini plot that led up to the game's release, and players that participated earned a wearable and an exclusive site theme. I was too old for it at the time, but I do know a lot of people had a lot of love for this game. Like Treasure Keepers and KeyQuest, Petpet Park was shut down once Jumpstart took control of the brand. There is an attempt being made to rebuild the game, just from the ground up, and I wish them luck bringing back such a fun piece of so many people's childhoods. If you're interested in seeing that, I'll leave a link in the description. This refers to the ongoing fandom discussion about the differences between Neopets that walk on all fours and those that stand on 2 legs. Anthropets, or pets that walk on 2 legs, wield weapons, or otherwise participate in other human-like activity, have been around for a very, very long time. They tend to pop up in promotional images, as shopkeepers, and, of course, as characters in plots. While some simply prefer one over the other, the primary fandom debate is about why both exist, and if there is some kind of actual in-universe difference between them. I have seen 3 main theories about this. One, that there are 2 universes, and that in one, the pets are bipedal, and in the other, there are pets. 2, that we've got sort of a goofy Pluto situation, and that some pets are simply more human than others. This, of course, raises a lot of questions like, are we the players Neopets in this scenario? I don't know. But the third option, that Neopets can just swap between quad or bipedal at will, might be the most disturbing of them all, because if all Neopets have the ability to function as humans, then keeping them as pets seems pretty weird all of a sudden. World Challenges was yet another way for Neopians to show their prowess at the myriad flash games on the site. Separate from the high score trophies, World Challenges pitted actual players against each other head-to-head, albeit asynchronously. Here's how it worked. Players could go to a game and click the World Challenge link if one was available. Not every game was available every day. If a game was having a World Challenge that day, you could choose its lobby from a list and pay to play it for a 1-hour block, say for example 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. The lobby screen displayed a lot of information, such as who had submitted any scores for the given hour, their wins and losses, and their high scores. The World Challenge was completed by playing the flash game and submitting your score after entering the World Challenge. Your score would then be matched at random against one of the other players in the lobby. That all happened behind the scenes and only after a certain number of people had joined the lobby, so no players could know who they had beaten or who they'd lost to. Scoring was a little bit complicated, but basically there were 3 ways to win. Players could also take first place in multiple categories, although they only won a single prize per lobby. The top 50% of players received not just Neo points, but also an exclusive map piece. This map piece was usually related to the game in some way. For example, Nova Defender would give out a Krellador map. Each map had 20 pieces. Players could win 3 map pieces a day, and once they had completed a map, they received a rare prize, such as a paintbrush or a rare pet. There is a lot more that went into this gameplay mode, but I think it just goes to show the different ways that Neopets used to have for players to interact with each other. Sadly, World Challenges stopped functioning properly a while ago, and like most things, there's just no sign of their return. I'm putting these together even though they're separate on the Iceberg, just because it's easiest to explain them together. These were the first and second of Neopets' attempts to get mobile games off the ground to varying degrees of success. Modern mobile games, not like Neopets Mobile. Ghoul Catchers was a match 3 game whose only real redeeming quality was the ability to hook it up with your Neopets account and earn 50,000 Neo points a day through playing the game. Sorry Ghoul Catchers fans, it just wasn't that good. It also suffered a pretty terrible bug for its entire lifespan that blocked older accounts from being linked for some reason. Legends and Letters was a better attempt at a game, at least in my opinion. It was a Scrabble/battle game where your party members dealt damage based on the words you played on the board. Like many games of this kind, it had some fun level up and gotcha mechanics, and later on introduced daily rewards and challenges which could unlock prizes on Neopets' site itself. Both of these games were officially shelved in 2020 when Neopets announced their major pivot toward a mobile site. The games were taken off the app stores, but are still playable if you have downloaded them to a device. There were a number of ads that ran for Neopets in the 2000s, such as the ones advertising merch or the video game, but this Iceberg is specifically referring to the ones that ran on Nickelodeon in the mid to late aughts. After parent company Viacom bought the site, Nick started showing ads promoting site events, like the Altador Cup, as well as random little animations that showed off features of the site, like this animation about the lab ray. Nitpicky side note, but the Blummeroo turning into a Cadoti is not even possible. Like, why does this exist? Why does this happen? Anyway, I digress. These ads ran for a number of years from what I can tell, and while there are a few on YouTube, they're not the best quality, so I can understand why this one's so far down. The Phantom Orange Shirt Guy, also known as Ollie, is an ex-staff member of the Neopets team. He was a major programmer for the site, primarily for Flash games. Many of his games featured an Easter egg where his avatar, TPOSG or the Phantom Orange Shirt Guy, would pop up randomly or if certain conditions were met. Since some of these conditions were weird or like really uncommon, his appearance was sometimes a fun wink to players. Because of this recognizable status, he gained kind of a cult following on the site, becoming a beloved member of the team. This references a caption contest entry that was posted to the Neopian Times. A user asked once about how contest entries were selected, and an editor posted a supposedly random selection of entries as examples. One of them was this one, and I'm gonna try to read this as accurately as possible. Ah, Mr. Snecky, I see you are wearing your fan's top. You are wearing yours too, Mr. Coconut. Speaking of coconut, where did you get the new flying hat of coconut? What coconut? Oh, that coconut near my hat. What? A coconut on my hat? Boom! Ah, my head! Good night, Mr. Coconut. Mr. Coconut quickly became an inside joke among fans and has popped up on multiple places on the site. In the late 2000s, it was common for websites to provide toolbars for users to install to their browser. These worked like extensions that gave users a number of benefits, like being able to search specific sites easily or keeping track of real-time news, stocks, and RSS feeds. Neopets put out their own version, which was really just a rebranded Yahoo search bar that had a number of features, such as quick links, a search bar, Neo Mail, and, most famously, Tarla's Treasures. Tarla's Treasures worked like this. Occasionally, when browsing the web, an icon on the player's toolbar would blink, and if the player saw it fast enough and was able to click it, they would get a rare prize. Prizes were typically pretty good, such as things like paintbrushes, secret lab map pieces, and doubloons, just to name a few. Players who adopted the toolbar also gained early access to creating a Bori, as well as exclusive access to the Ice Bori. For many years, the only way to get an Ice Bori was by installing the toolbar, as they could not be zapped, dipped, or even pounded, as an Ice Bori would become normal colored upon entrance to the pound. I can't even begin to go into why some users find some antagonists relatable or sympathetic. There are simply too many of them. Many of the plots are well written, with villains with very sympathetic motivations, and users find the villains compelling. But X did nothing wrong is an evolution of the troll phrase, Hitler did nothing wrong. I know. This phrase is often used by people who think that ironic racism or anti-Semitism is funny or whatever. Yeah, I don't condone it. However, it has since morphed into the semi-ironic phrase used by many fandoms who seem the harm in their problematic characters, but I guess enjoy standing them anyway. See also Homestuck, Berserk, Pokemon. I don't condone the use of this phrase given its connection to 4chan anti-Semitism, but it's on here and that's why. I mean, this is just what it says on the tin. For those who don't know, Ghidorah and Illusin are fairies that give players quests. These quests are a little unique from other fairy quests in that they can be taken at will as long as you have not taken the opposing fairy's quest within the last 12 hours. They allow the use of the shop wizard, and they even level up, allowing you to take more quests that give out better rewards. However, your level will be reset if you fail to return the quest item in the time limit. Neopets is a fandom, just like any other, so in the end, shipping is gonna happen. Whether Ghidorah and Illusin are dating, want to date, or used to date is up for some debate, but many feel the romantic tension between them is palpable, because their reasons for hating each other is unclear. April Fool's Day has been a long-standing tradition on Neopets, and while I'm sure many of them could, and will, make this Iceberg, I can see why Nick made this list. Nick was a fictional human character, a rarity on the site, who had been brought in by TNT to spiff it up a bit. Unfortunately for our boy Nick, both times have been something of a disaster. In 2003, Neopets was rebranded as Neopets, a totally rad and hip new design. On top of introducing us to Nick, they also announced that they would be doing away with currency entirely, making everything on the site free. Then, in 2020, Nick made a reappearance, updating the site once again. This time, he made the pages fresh and innovative by flipping them upside down, reversing their text, or randomizing links on the site. He also supposedly was like the mascot for the Neopet team's Tumblr, but I can't find any evidence of that. But that keeps popping up when you search for him, so I guess it's true. Every so often, Neopets deletes large amounts of inactive accounts in what is known as a purge. This is done for a number of reasons: to free up space, to keep the servers running smoothly, and to free up long dormant account and pet names, you name it. Obviously, losing your long beloved account in Neopets can be heartbreaking, but there are also those who look forward to them, mostly in anticipation of freeing up some rare and valuable pet names. Some people even keep a list of desirable names on hand and check them for purges from time to time. There have been a few large purges in Neopia's history, as well as a few smaller ones, but I don't think there have been any in a long time. Like the debate about Neopets sentience, genetics is another hot button issue. How exactly do Neopets make little baby Neopets? Without a paintbrush, I mean. It's unclear. There are a number of characters that have kids or siblings of a different species, so why can Neopets have babies that aren't their species? An ex-member of the Neopets team, Snarky, once confirmed on her Tumblr, they just can. She went on to say that there is a set of internal rules for the staff, but she didn't elaborate on what those are. Perhaps that's in that Neopian Bible that's a little further down the iceberg? This is so ingrained in my brain, it's hard for me to believe that this is so far down the iceberg, but then again, whenever I bring it up, it seems like it's a surprise to at least one person, so maybe that's right. In the first year of Neopets, before it really blew up, it was basically the Wild West. Without knowing what a huge and young audience they were about to receive, Adam and Donna just went nuts. And one way they did that was in the design of the original Neopets. These range from scary to the adorable to the... For example, the Bruce was originally Bruce Forsyth, a well-known British entertainer with a lengthy career as a host of variety and game shows. And when I say the Bruce was Bruce, I mean he was Bruce. The image was just a poorly photoshopped image of a young Bruce Forsyth over the then customary blue circle, and he came in the original 4 colors. The next one's even weirder. The doe-eyed cutie the cow was originally Macy Gray, like beloved singer-songwriter Macy Gray. This one was at least an illustration. She only came in 3 colors and had a ray gun. The Iceberg doesn't mention this one, but there's also at least one other human Neopet that I know of, Mellish, who eventually became Mincy. He was designed after one of Adam's friends, and frankly, he's my favorite of the adoptable humans. Am I the only one who thinks he was cuter as a person? Fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on your perspective, soon after Neopets' huge popularity boom, they redesigned a lot of pets, some just to bring the art up to standard, and some to protect the site from concerns about copyright. This was probably for the best, although I'll always look back on the time you could adopt literal humans as pets with a deep fondness. I've mentioned this a couple of times before, but in case you don't know, in Neopets, players can paint their pets different colors to change their appearance. This is done through the use of consumable items called paintbrushes. The rarity of the brushes depends on the color. For example, the purple paintbrush talked about earlier in this video is fairly inexpensive and common. However, some brushes aren't being produced anymore and cannot be bought in official Neopian shops. These brushes are labeled as retired when they're in your inventory. They can still be used though, and players can still obtain them through random events and as prizes for certain things. On the flip side of retired paintbrushes are retired colors. Different from retired brushes, pets cannot be painted these colors anymore. The most well-known of these are glass and stone. These were retired respectively, with glass pets art becoming Tyranian pets, and a few years later, stone turning into island pets. The brushes, however, remained on the site and stayed the same. In a Neopian Times article, the editor writes, "These may become collector's items due to their rarity." That actually didn't happen, and instead, those 2 brushes are now just dirt cheap and totally unusable. 2 other unusable colors are the Lutari paintbrush that I talked about earlier and the unicorn brush, which early on turned pets white and gave them a horn. I actually love everything about the unicorn pets. Presumably the release of the Uni Pet made this brush obsolete and it was completely removed from the site. I would love to see a return someday though. Remember unconverted pets? I hope so, because this isn't the last time they're gonna come up. UC Gate refers to a big kerfluffle around those unconverted pets and the pound. The pound is a place where Neopians put pets they don't want anymore. It's sad but true. They're not deleted though. Other users can visit the pound and adopt those left there. It's a bit clunky and weird, so clunky and weird actually that it's haunted by a well-known glitch. See, the way the pound works is that players search the pound by clicking a button to see more. However, this glitch causes certain pets to get stuck. Their names contain strings of letters that for whatever reason cause them to not show up in the pound. This means that there are hundreds of pets that cannot be found from randomly browsing, although they can be adopted if you search their name manually. And so that's what stuck pet hunters do. They manually search the pound for pets whose names include these strings of letters in hopes of freeing them or finding rare and unusual pets. Without getting into the details, there's a great post on r/hobbydrama that I'll link below if you want to read more. Some users found a way to search large chunks of pets at a time. One of those users apparently hit the jackpot. On November 22nd, 2019, a user later dubbed UC Santa dropped a list of 700 unconverted pets on the official forums. Enjoy or something, IDK, they said. I just want to see Pound Chat go crazy. And go crazy they did. 700 pets may sound like a lot, but Neopets players are ravenous for unconverted pets. They can't get enough. The pets were quickly snatched up, and not all by the needy. One person claimed to have adopted 12 pets, filling up their main and side accounts to the max pet limits. It was pandemonium. Like I said, the full story is wild, but the Pound Chat was reeling for weeks. Then, unceremoniously, someone claiming to be the UC Santa on a different account appeared again, dropping the name of a few UC Pound pets to prove it. This person also hinted a few times that December 28th would be a big day, and the Pound Chat waited with bated breath. Then, at 6 p.m. on December 28th, the unconverted Santa posted this. Mwahahaha, psych you bunch of beggars. If you want your dream unconverted, just buy it with US dollars. And then posted a list of cheat sites. basically revealing the whole thing to have been a huge troll. The boards basically melted down at this point. People were pissed. They were salty. They were hugely disappointed. It's gone down in infamy, especially among those who were there. No one knows if the second poster and UC Santa were the same, or if they were just some troll who wanted to create more chaos, but it did create an incredible story. Again, if you want to know more, I highly recommend reading I Am Not a Windmill's excellent write-up about this on Hobby Drama. In 2006, at the website's peak, Variety reported that Warner Brothers had bought the rights and an animated film was in the works. Not much is actually known about it, but we do have some hints from the AMA Donna and Adam did. Once production began on the film, the two wrote a treatment starring Fiora, the Fairy Queen. Apparently this was discarded, and then the film seems to have gotten caught up in development hell. Adam and Donna say that new writers kept being shuffled around until things just kind of fell apart. The last official news of the film was on the Flash game Jelly Blobs of Doom, which states that the movie is due out sometime in 20XX. With the announcement of the Neopets animated TV show last year, I think it's fair to say that the movie has long since been scrapped. The Neoboards are one of the most common ways to chat with other Neopets players. Users can advertise shops, get help with fairy quests, or just chat about side events. These are easily accessible from the Neoboards option under the Community tab. Some boards are not so easy to find though. Boards have been added and deleted over the years, and some, such as the old Jelly World board, was completely hidden and could not be accessed without a direct link. Or at least it would have been if one had existed. You know what I mean. Unfortunately, Jelly World's board seems to have been deleted in the recent site overhaul, even though, strangely, some older boards seem to have stuck around in the redesign, like the KeyQuest board. Other hidden or deleted boards include the Premium board, available only for users paying for Neopets Premium, as well as the old Neo Homes board, the Evil Things board, and the old Theme Park board. This is another one that I have to thank r/hobbydrama and the user I Am Not a Windmill for. Their record keeping of this particular bit of drama is priceless. Jungle Boo was a pet, an unconverted Darrigan Bruce owned by a member of the Neopets team, a staff member who works for the site. Remember, unconverted pets are rare and highly sought after because they are pets that could only have been created before the pet conversion in 2009. There was something odd about this Bruce, however. Users on the site eventually noticed that she wasn't nearly old enough to have been unconverted. Her age at 2,600 days old meant that she had to have been created in 2013. Well after the pet conversion. As you can imagine, there was outrage. The Neopets team had been saying for years that creating new unconverted pets was something that could not be done, and yet here was undeniable evidence to the contrary. And of course, people were angry at just the general unfairness of it. A staff member giving themselves an extremely rare and valuable pet went against everything that was supposed to be fair and just, as the Neopets team always claimed that they never used their powers for their personal accounts. There was apparently a minor attempt at a cover-up, as Jungle Boo's date of birth was changed from 2,600 days to 7,600 days old, making her as old as the site itself. Then, as users became even more outraged, and this was called out on the boards and Twitter, Jungle Boo was just converted entirely. As far as I'm aware, there haven't been any official statements about it. I actually remember when all of this went down, and I seem to remember there being a follow-up, but I can't find any evidence of that, so I'd really be happy to hear from y'all if you know anything about this one. It is such a crazy bit of drama, and it obviously has huge overarching implications for the Neopets team and favoritism and exactly how unconverted pets can be created. I just find this one really interesting. Back in what I earlier called the Wild West of Neopets, there was not quite the same standard applied to world building as there is now. As I understand it, nowadays there's an effort made to stick to a consistent world and theme. Back in the early aughts, though, it was a different story, and so there were a lot of humans walking around Neopia. Many of these were story NPCs and shopkeepers. Characters like Edna the Witch and the Island Mystic were originally humans, only changing after TNT cracked down on the idea that there were no humans in Neopia. The only existing possible exception to this is the Tiki Tak Tombola Man, though what exactly is happening under that mask is anyone's guess. Neopets and Pokemon evolved right around the same time, pun intended, so it's no surprise that early Neopets threw in a jokey little reference to their rival pet collecting game. On a page known as the Gallery of Evil, a collection of evil and monstrous creatures from all around the site, there was a page dedicated to the Pikachu Eater. It was this weird froggy lizard-looking thing with the unmistakable ears and tails of the beloved Pokemon Pikachu poking out of its mouth. I can't find any images of its gallery page from back in the day, but the current site does contain a reference. If you look closely at the open Gallery of Evil book, you can see a distinct yellow creature getting chomped on. Earlier we talked about the Return of Dr. Sloth plot and how it had to be put on hold for a few years. Hannah and the Ice Caves was the plot that ended up replacing it. In a reference to this, and an alternate ending to the Hannah plot, Dr. Sloth apparently took this pretty hard and sent one of his minions to transfigure Hannah in revenge for taking over what was supposed to be his event. This joke final page was eventually replaced with the canon ending to the Hannah and the Ice Caves plot on December 23rd. A long-standing infamous user, best known for being a former mod with some of the strongest pets in the game. The position of having the strongest pet meant that she placed highly in early Battledome-based plots. For example, she is the only user to have ever received the unique item Darrigan's Sword of Death. Her account has been compromised at least once, with the ultra-strong pet in question having been pounded, although he was eventually returned to her. She's a controversial figure, with many believing her to have received special treatment from TNT, as well as the fact that she received aforementioned strongest pet from her boyfriend when he left the site. I imagine she's in this place on the Iceberg because she was mostly well known over a decade ago, when things like placements and Battledome plots were a much bigger deal than they are now. So remember when I said that Neopets couldn't die? I'll hold on to that because it remains true, but this part is about to get a little spooky. This refers to official art of dead Neopets, and I don't mean ghost pets. In the early days, there was something called the Pet Cemetery. I think this was just mostly a joke as a play on the Stephen King novel, as it didn't really do anything, as far as I'm aware, pets were just never meant to die. Like, Adam and Donna didn't have plans to create dead pets or anything, they just put this page in as a joke. Despite this though, there is still a bit of official art from the early days depicting dead pets, floating out there in the internet ether. Long considered lost media, The Last Smiley was a notoriously difficult and strange Neopets game that was eventually removed from the site, but not placed in the official games graveyard, where players can revisit retired games. A lot of games didn't end up in the games graveyard, mostly because they were timed sponsorships, and keeping ads on the site without getting paid was not exactly the Neopets way. The Last Smiley was not one of these, however. It was a strange 3D platforming game in which you played a smiley trying to save a bunch of emojis, or emoticons back in the day, I guess, from some sort of like forum-based Doom. Instead of Flash, it was one of the few to utilize Shockwave in service of creating a really unique, unusual game. As I said before, it was long thought that this game had been lost to time. However, some time ago, some users discovered that Neopets still hosted some of the files for games that were no longer listed on the Clear site. This included some sponsored games, as well as The Last Smiley. In 2000, Neopets added the cooking pot to Mystery Island. The cooking pot allows users to combine multiple items to create one entirely new item. The recipes are a mystery, however, with users having to discover what items combine to make what on their own. The Spoppy was a pet that could be created out of the combination of a poppet and a spider pet. It was a pretty unremarkable item, except for one thing. Somehow, there was a glitch in which multiple Spoppies were being created with different item IDs. Since all items of the same type are supposed to have the same item ID to keep everything nice and neat in the database, the Neopets team named these errant new Spoppies Spoppy 2 and Spoppy 3, apparently solving the problem and ending what seems to have been a duplication glitch that was occurring at the same time. These ended up being very rare items, with only a few Spoppy 2 and 3 in existence. They can no longer be created in the cooking pot, but Petpets can be zapped into a Spoppy 2 with the Petpet Laborate. Scurvy Island was the canonical island that played a role in the Curse of Maraqua plot in 2005. Though originally announced as a new visitable location on the site, the Neopets team decided against adding it. According to the Neopian Times editorial in issue 180, it was going to be too similar to Croc Island, and so they decided to devote more of their time to Maraqua. This is the very first Neopets mobile game, released even prior to Lutari Island and Neopets Mobile. Gameplay consisted of, rolling a coconut and getting points based on how far it rolled. Users could submit high scores with a unique code given by the game and earn prizes and a very rare avatar. As far as I know, like almost nobody had this game, so that's a fun one. So one thing I haven't talked about much yet is the Battledome. The Battledome was created pretty early in Neopets history, creating a use for all of those cool stats your pets could get and train. Players could play against computer or human opponents, equipping their pets with items or training them to get special abilities gifted by fairies. These were given to pets mostly through the use of bottled fairies, with each fairy element giving out a different set of abilities. There was no limit to the number of abilities a pet could learn, unlike now when each pet can only learn one ability per tier. This meant that wealthy and dedicated players could eventually teach their their pets every single ability provided that they could get the appropriate fairy bottle, and that their pet was a high enough level. The abilities included things like Fly, Heal, and Thundertail. When the Battledom 2.0 came out, all ability points were reset to 0, and those who had dedicated their time to training all their pets' abilities were given 1,000 Neo points for each ability that they had at reset, which is hugely underpaid. The officially licensed Neopets Cereal produced in 2006 by General Mills. It featured an original character, Jake the Explorer, a cougar with a fondness for island berries and presumably cereal. Each box came with one of 3 official Neopets trading cards. There was a tie-in with the site where players tired of feeding their pets free omelets day in and day out could give their pets a free bowl of cereal instead for a limited time. This was a game that existed way back in the day. It was not a card-based solitaire game, but based instead on peg solitaire. Think that game they have on all the tables at the Cracker Barrel. Players move Poogles by jumping it over another Poogle and into an empty space. The jumped Poogle is then removed from the board. The goal is to have the fewest Poogles left at the end. Players could play the game for a small fee and once a day win Neo points based on their score. The most points were awarded for having only one Poogle left directly in the middle. Players could keep playing even after receiving their once a day payout for a chance to win stat gains for their Neopets, or more importantly to me when I was a kid, a Poogle plushie, which had a very rare chance to be a magical Poogle plushie, which could turn your pet into that specific variety of Poogle. Since Poogles were a limited species, this was the primary reason for playing the game. These were Neopets team-based quote-unquote plots. They weren't really plots at all. Basically, they were gruesome stories told over the course of a couple of weeks about the members of the Neopets team getting horribly maimed and killed. The first plot, Sacrificers, was actually the first user participation event in the site's history. Players could vote on who would survive being eaten by cannibals. Yikes. But other than voting and watching the flash animations, there was little to it. The murder mystery that came out a little bit later had a little more meat to it. The goal was twofold. Users would vote to guess who would survive the longest while submitting questions to try and suss out the murderer. Players who discovered the murderer early enough received a trophy. These two events are somewhat infamous among those who participated for being pretty unflinching, if cartoony, depictions of the staff of their favorite website being killed. As alluded to earlier, a few pages of the galleries of heroes and villains have gone missing. On top of Pikachu Eater, some former entries include Daddy Grub, Queen Spider, and the aforementioned Happiness Fairy, aka Dr. Sloth in a fairy outfit. Teased as early as 2002, Neoschools were a planned feature that were never released. On the site, it got pretty far in development, and according to Snarky's Tumblr, they were even finished behind the scenes. A shop was placed in Neopia Central for players to buy school supplies for their pets, and the new features page linked a list of all of the upcoming teachers and classes that players' Neopets could take. According to Snarky, however, the game, while complete, was just not very fun. Rather than release a site feature that was boring to play, they shelved it, and it seems it was just never revisited. I was one of the players who was really excited for it, so every time I see the stationery that still exists on the site, I just get a little sad. Now we're deep in the weeds. NeoQuest 3D was a text-based game, ironically enough, modeled after adventure games of the 80s and 90s, like Zork. The name is a joke, as it's even less advanced than NeoQuests 1 and 2, which were styled after old-school sprite-based RPGs. It could not be found in the game room and was instead hidden in the Meridel Castle. It was a short but fun little nod to old-school dungeon crawlers. Unfortunately, like many Flash games, it is no longer on the site. This refers to a set of 3 villains introduced and instrumental to the Battle of Meridel plotline. The 3 were known individually as Greed, Revenge, and Ambition, although we don't know which is which, and the real reason behind much of what unfolds in the plot. They're kind of like the secret antagonists behind everything. Donna admitted in an interview when asked about the Scientologist investors that the 3 were based on 3 frequent visitors connected to the Scientologists. Adam and Donna said that they just looked evil, like the bad guys in Superman 2. So they had the art department design the 3 after those 3 shady characters. This is an extremely rare trophy given to only one user, Donna. It was created by Adam and the rest of the team at the time to make Donna feel better after a particularly nasty root canal. That's like literally all there was to it, although it's pretty cute though. two characters that were instrumental in the Curse on Maraqua plot. This was an early plot, and one of the very few in the site's history with zero user participation whatsoever. These two characters in particular were later retconned into totally different characters. Captain Dread, the undead skeleton Kiko, was later turned into Captain Scarblade. According to Jelly Neo's Book of Ages, this is because of the difficulty they had in drawing Captain Dread in the comics. I mean, I don't know, like a skeleton Kiko looked kind of easy to draw to me, but I'm not sure. King Koi was also changed. The name change could be a sort of like Bowser / King Koopa thing, I guess, but he was also redesigned, presumably to match the newer, more shiny artwork of the later years. Hey, remember this guy? He's the cougar from the cereal box. The Adventures of Jake was a very, very short-lived comic that existed on the website. It only has one chapter, The Mystical Tiki Idol. It seems like he was invented to be a mascot for the cereal, and TNT tried to see what else they could do with him. For whatever reason, it seems his comic didn't really take off, though Jake continues to appear on the site in various ways to this day. Altador was a new land introduced in 2006, the first to be discovered on the other side of the planet. That's right, flat Neopiers. Neopia is a globe. Before its release, Altador was teased by a different name, Talador. This remained its name late enough into production that some of the trading cards even have Talador printed on them instead of Altador. In the Neopian Times, when asked about the change, the editor said that it was because Lawyerbot, their nickname for their lawyer, threw a fit. In the late 90s and early aughts, it was fairly common for websites to have virtual greeting cards to send to friends and family's email inboxes. These could be any combination of images, sound, and animation, and they served both as a helpful site feature as well as advertisement for the website itself. Neopets was no exception, and while most of the Neo greetings are what you might expect, there were a few wackier ones. These range from the image of a fire fairy saying, "Fire is a girl's best friend," to an animated "thank you for not eating me" card, but by far the darkest and most weird was the bad friend card. It featured two pet pets, a snorkel and a wharf, spending time together. The text above read, "Friends are nice for the good times and extra special during the bad times, but where were you when I really needed you?" Toward the middle of the animation, what looks like a mutant Grundo hand reaches down and picks up the wharf. The snorkel flees, leaving his friend to be devoured by the monster, the aftermath of which is clearly depicted in the final shot, showing an empty room with splatters of red blood. Low-quality screenshots of the original are still floating around the web. That version was eventually changed to depict green slime instead of red blood, but the Neo greeting itself remains on the Neopets page to this day, largely untouched. Funnily enough, a screenshot from that greeting is the thumbnail for the friends section of the Neo greetings page, just not one of the violent parts. This was a logic puzzle intended to be released during the Hannah and the Ice Caves plot, though it wasn't connected to the Hannah story. Based on the style of an earlier logic puzzle plot from 2001, the goal was to solve a number of mysteries surrounding a dangerous dinner party that involved the 6 most infamous criminal masterminds in Neopia. Each dinner guest had a secret, a meal that they ate, a unique forum avatar, and their criminal specialty. Clues would have been released over time, and presumably those who guessed correctly would have won some sort of prize, including, we know for a fact, the avatars that the thieves used. Only 2 clues were ever released. The poison specialist ate the steak platter, and the card shark was afraid of spiders. It was shelved soon after that. According to the official page, as well as some issues of the Neopian Times, the event was just started at a busy and chaotic time, and they were just never able to complete it. Unfortunately, it means that those avatars also went unused. When Mystery Island was first released, players could not just visit it whenever they wanted. Instead, they had to ride this ferry that cost 3 Mystery Island totems, items carved to look like different Neopets. These were only given out as random events, making them difficult to come by and making Mystery Island that much more of a mystery in the early days. These totems can still be found on the site today, though they no longer serve any purpose but nostalgia, and some trading card game cards were printed referencing these old totems. The land totems were nixed pretty early on. It seemed like it just made things pretty difficult. The Iceberg says land totems, so it implies that there's more than just the Mystery Island totems. I don't know of any other lands that required these types of totems. Editing cat here. I did end up finding a couple more land totems. There is the fairy totem that got you to Fairyland, and the ice totem that got you to Happy Valley, I think, back in the day. Let me know if you know of any others that I missed. A rumored hacker of the early 2000s. Much of what is known about his hacks are based in rumor and speculation, but a few things are more commonly repeated than others. Somehow, Ado came to access the database that Neopets operates from and was able to change the values that correlated to things like shop size or Neopet stats. Exactly how he did this is unknown, but I think it likely that he used SQL injection, a not uncommon exploit that injects malicious code to websites in order to mess with their databases. This is not a particularly complicated kind of hack, and in the AMA with Donna on Reddit, she confirmed that the majority of Neopets hackers were what are referred to by programmers as script kiddies, or people with very little programming knowledge who run pre-written scripts or programs to exploit known vulnerabilities. I only mention that it's likely that he used SQL injection because he's often referred to as the guy who hacked into Neopets servers. This rumor is repeated by people, I think, without a clear understanding of how these types of hacks usually work. As a result of that, and a policy on the Neo boards that any discussion of hacking could result in the deletion of the thread or even a temporary ban, people grew to believe that Ado somehow wielded a massive amount of power over the site for a short period of time. It's often repeated that he somehow gained a backdoor to Neopets servers, though I can find no verification of that. That would indeed have been a huge deal had it happened, but it simply was not necessary for the kind of damage he is alleged to have caused. That rumored damage includes being the cause of a number of popular and rich users' shops resetting to 0, the reset of Battledome pet stats to 10, an early dupe day on which days could be infinitely duplicated, and even the random releases of certain limited pets. I just want to repeat, none of these are verified. It's commonly believed that the Neopets team orchestrated a cover of Ado's hacks. For example, when some pet stats reset to 10, the Neopets team announced it on the news page by saying that the lab ray had misfired, instead of revealing the true cause. That actually did happen, but a cursory glance at that page would show that they were clearly joking. They sort of sarcastically mentioned it wasn't a database error at all. Like, they weren't actually trying to convince their players that the lab ray had anything to do with it. Donna and Adam joke in their Reddit AMA about Ado, with Adam claiming to quiver in fear of his leetness, and Donna saying she doesn't remember half the things he's alleged to have done. At this point, it will not come as a shock to you that there was some mature content on Neopets in its early days, and that extends to items. Changed and removed items include bottles of beer, some of which became different types of Neo-Cola, and Neo-Wines, which became sparkling juices. The bottles of beer are often said to have been called Neo-Rona, but I think this is just a rumor. A pet page created soon after the changeover says that this item never existed and they were always just called bottles of beer. In 2017, an item called Tentacled Alien Wine seems to have slipped through the censors somehow, but it has since been changed to the generic and much less delicious sounding Tentacled Alien drink. As I said before, Legends and Letters was cancelled pretty early in its lifespan. It was only active for about a year before its closure was announced, so there was a lot of planned material that never got used. The first bit of content that we know was lost was the Next Land update, Altador. We know about this because it was the next on the map screen. This likely would have introduced 20 new levels like in previous lands and new character cards. According to the Cutting Room Floor, hidden in the game's files are 18 different unused species of leader Neopets, which are those created and customized by users. Some of these even have painted variants. It's unknown if these would have been released later on as new Neopets that users could create and use, or if these were unused during the production of the game. And there's also this picture of a factory called factory.png. A long-standing mystery, the Edna avatar is given to the player when they complete a quest for the witch to help her make a spell. Unlike most avatars, the exact requirements are unknown. Guesses include the spell must have the word rainbow in it, needing items of specific rarity, or items in a certain price bracket. The most commonly accepted guess is that you must complete a quest that requires 3 items, a theory that was bolstered by the Neopian Times editorial that said, if you're trying to be thrifty about it, we suggest not bothering to fulfill her requests unless she asks you for a few items. It remains hard to check if this is true or not, given that most people attempting to get the avatar are using this advice, so they're only turning in quests with 3 items. It's hard to say then if they got it because they turned in 3 items or it was just random. This refers to a number of both named and unnamed Neopets NPCs that no longer exist on the site. Like I said, most of these were Neopets, though some of these were just non-human, such as in the case of the Garden Center shopkeeper, who was just a giant ladybug. A number of old Battledome challengers and Neodeck cards have also been lost to time. There was also a removed character from Neopets The Darkest Fairy, who I'll be talking about a little bit later on this list. According to the Neopets wiki, NeoVision was a Neopets-themed video sharing service that allowed users to upload videos about Neopia and its inhabitants. This was in the early days of video streaming when YouTube and other services like Blip.tv were gaining success. Users would submit videos of Neopets-related things. Most of these were comedic in nature, a lot of them were animated, or stop-motion featuring real-life Neopets merchandise. Like the Neopian Times, users whose submissions were accepted received a trophy. The holiday trophies were advertised as a special trophy for winners who submitted during a special holiday spotlight, presumably with a holiday theme, such as Christmas and Halloween. The trophy was uploaded to the Neopets servers, but it went unused, however, and the winners of those spotlights simply received the standard trophy for their winning submissions. The Altador Cup is a yearly sports tournament in which different lands all around Neopia compete in a sport not unlike football/soccer called UU-Ball. Users play a number of flash games and earn points for their team, winning prizes along the way. Jelly World doesn't have a team that competes in the cup, that would be silly because it doesn't exist, but they do have a practice team that players can use to learn the ropes of UU-Ball in a stress-free environment. Nowadays, it's made up entirely of 5 bright yellow jelly chias, but older players remember the old lineup, which is made of different jelly painted Neopets. They were a Blummeroo, an Usul, a Kugra, a Cow, and a Teko. I can't find any reasons for the change, so if you have any ideas for why that happened, please let me know. The Shop Wizard is like the Google of Neopets, but for shops. When players are making a shop on Neopets, they might notice a world option, allowing them to choose where their shop is located. At the moment, there are only 3 options: Neopia Central, Maraqua, and the Haunted Woods. At one point, Mystery Island and Virtupet Space Station were also an option. This might seem weird now since all the shops are essentially connected, but back in the early days of Neopets, shops were all placed in different marketplaces. Though this isn't common today, users could and still can browse the different marketplaces by going to the Explore page in hopes of finding a bargain. Your marketplace also changed which shop wizard your store could be found in. For a while, there was a different shop wizard for each marketplace, and you had to search each one individually to try and find the best deal. However, only the Neopia Central shop wizard was easily accessible with a link from the main menu, the way he is now. This made it quite a pain to check all the different shop wizards, and many people didn't even bother, and some didn't even know this was an option. Because of this, entrepreneurial players would put their shops in Neopia Central. There was more competition, so the prices tended to be lower, but also a much higher chance of your item being found by someone who wanted to buy it. I don't exactly remember when it changed, but I do remember that the variants stuck around a little bit after they upgraded the shop wizard to just search all the marketplaces. Even now you can see a remnant of this on the marketplaces, though when you click the link, it just takes you to a regular shop wizard. Another one that frankly deserves its own video, so let me know if that's something you'd be interested in. Former staff member Snarky, bless her, has given us quite some insight into this project. Designed to be a companion app for Neopets and not a total replacement, Neopets on the Go was a kind of Neopets Mobile 2.0. The team worked with focus groups of veteran players to find out what users would want from it, and eventually landed on features that ranged from basic, like checking your notifications in Neo Mails, to more hands-on, like playing games and doing dailies. It also featured a new NPC called Blip, the Brilliant Logistical Interaction Program. According to Snarky, the app was about 97% finished when the team announced it to the site. They even posted a poll about naming it. However, Neopets was sold to Jumpstart, and as you've seen, a lot of things just kind of died during that changeover. The Neopets team was never officially given a reason for the cancellation, if you could even call it that. The app was just never submitted to any app stores, with Jumpstart instead choosing to focus on the creation of ghoul catchers. This refers to only one glitch of many that have haunted the Grundos for quite some time. A bunch of Grundos were created with some sort of error that caused them to display unknown as their color instead of the color itself. Apparently, this was fairly desirable with some people, as evidenced in a Neopian Times editorial question, which says that these glitched pets are being traded for very high-value pets on the pound board. The Neopets team confirmed that this was unintentional and that they would be changing and fixing this glitch, although it took them a while to do so. Grundos seem to be at the center of a number of glitches for whatever reason. Some Grundos have been created with spaces or characters in their names which should have been prohibited, as well as a number of other funny or interesting glitches. This refers to an infamous glitch that allowed rare Neopets to be created at the Create-A-Pet. Drakes were released in 2002, and they are part of the very exclusive group of pets that cannot be created through Create a Pet even on their pet day. They are intended to be created through the hatching of a rare item called a drake egg. There have been 2 exceptions to this, however. The first was on their release, when an error allowed users to create drakes for a very short period of time, and the second was the infamous 999 day. As you may have guessed, this took place on September 9th, 2009, which also happened to be the Drake's Pet Day. And on this day, a glitch allowed users to make a Drake on the Create a Pet page. According to Jelly Neo, it is estimated that a few hundred Drakes were created in this way before Neopets caught the glitch and turned off creation. However, the damage was done, and instead of taking those pets away from people who got in on it while the getting was good, Neopets allowed them to keep their new drakes. 999 drakes hold a special place in some people's hearts, and for some it might add value to the tradability of the drake in question. Most Neopets players know about the Colton Shrine daily, but much less common knowledge is who Colton was, how he died, and who killed him. Colton III was the leader of the Lost Desert. He was known as a wise king beloved by his subjects, but one night he invited his advisors to dinner and was poisoned. Earlier, I mentioned the Guildmaster's plot that was abandoned. That was heavily based on this, which was known as the Usurper plot, which, like the Guildmaster plot, was essentially a logic puzzle. Players had to discover what meals guests ate at a dinner party, how many courses of the meal they ate, what their particular bad habit was, and of course, if they had killed King Colton. Clues were released every day in the form of hints, like Advisor Wessel had exactly 1 less course than the guest that ate the Cheops. The first 10 players to guess all 4 answers correctly received 2 million Neo points, and they plus the next 90 got magical items. At the end of the plot, it was revealed that the Princess Sankara was the murderer. She was a refugee from another country who wanted to retake her homeland, and though we don't know the motive for the murder, it's widely accepted that Colton refused her request for an army to do just that. Kayla from the Champions of Meridell's plot used to be called Kaylin. Her name is changed for unknown reasons. I really don't have much more info than this. Mariball is a flash game that resembled squash or racquetball. Players controlled an Aisha and tried to hit a ball back against their computer opponent. There are various power-ups and obstacles to avoid. A couple of years after the game's release, it was removed from the site unceremoniously. Unlike many previously removed games, it didn't make it into the game's graveyard. In an editorial in the Neopian Times, the Neopets team hinted that the game had broken in some way that might allow it to be open to exploitation, saying, "Games that are still functional but have been removed from the site for reasons, such as being outdated or replaced, generally go into the game's graveyard, but games that break are removed from the site indefinitely to avoid abuse." It is not known in which way Mariball may have broken. This refers to an NSFW calendar made for the Neopets team and sent to them by snail mail. TNT addressed this in an editorial once, answering the question, "What is the strangest submission you've ever been sent in the mail?" Quote, "That would be the Neopian hero pinup calendar someone drew and sent us around the time of the Hannah and the Ice Caves plot. We're not even sure we could describe any of the pictures burned into our poor minds without towing the line of indecency." This calendar was a collaboration effort, and though obviously most of it has been lost to time, at least one photo attributed to the calendar does exist on Tumblr, Natch. Avert your eyes if that's something you don't want to see. Okay, we good? Okay, let's move on. This was the second ever plot Neopets ever held. I actually have half a script written for this one, but it was so long ago and all the pages from the plot have been removed from Neopets. There was also no user involvement, making the video more of a straight recap, so I just dropped writing it. It was, however, the plot that revealed the Battle Dome and Maraqua to players, as well as a few classic characters. In brief, 3 Neopets discover a flyer for something called the Battle Dome. In searching for it, they are attacked by a monster named Chiazilla, almost drown, and find the hidden city of Maraqua, where they discover the leading Battle Dome researcher, Professor Chesterpot, has been kidnapped by Dr. Sloth. It seems to be very powerful, so Sloth wants to claim the Battle Dome for himself, and sends his own creation, Mecha Chiazilla, to attack Maraqua. The real Chiazilla shows up, and in an epic kaiju showdown, saves the day. In the end, in order to prevent Dr. Sloth from ever getting his hands on the Battle Dome, the Professor reveals its existence to all of Neopia. This plot features a number of older things that have been changed or removed entirely, like the old Battle Domes, old Maraqua, and the original King Koi. An April Fool's Day prank, this time from 2010. It was announced as state-of-the-art combat. It's time to take pain to a whole new dimension, which is kind of dark thinking about it. This was accompanied with a couple of videos that, look, I'm just gonna show you. I'm not 100% sure that there was anyone that truly fell for this if they watched the videos, but there you have it. An archive of these videos still exists on the Neopets Facebook page if you want to watch them. Another April Fool's Day prank in 2004, this one serving as the introduction of the Quigukis. Quigukis are Quiggle versions of Usuki dolls, collectible dolls much in the vein of Barbies. The announced Quiguki Armageddon trading card set promised to introduce the Quiguki world of the Quiguki world of Quigara. The Neopets team flooded the site with Quiguki content, like buddy icons, a how to draw page, and an official Neopedia entry. Since this was all a prank, however, all of it was removed on April 2nd, as the Quigukis weren't actually meant to be popular at all. They were supposed to be funny, you know, because they're like ugly or whatever. However, they did find their way into the hearts of some Neopians, including mine, and over time, the Neopets team has reintroduced Quigukis back into our ecosystem, including the Quiggle exclusive Quiguki color. From about 2008 to 2010, Viacom was working on a Neopets MMO known as Tales of Neopia. Information about this is pretty thin on the ground, but there have been a few concept art discoveries that have given us some info. It looks fairly typical for a medieval/fantasy style MMO. Some concept art seems to indicate maybe an isometric map style. There is NPC art of shopkeepers, and the resume of one of the developers seems to indicate that there was one single combat zone. Unfortunately, this has long since been scrapped. Some of the leftover concept art and posters were reused as key art for the mobile app Legends and Letters. Jaren was a major character during the Meridel plots. He was part of the discovery of Meridel and fought against the Darrigan Citadel, proving to be a crucial player. Later, he led another attack on the Citadel, this time from the air. While saving one of his sister's friends, Lord Cass threw him from the Citadel, leading to what was known as the Fall of Jaren. For a time, he was presumed dead, though it was eventually revealed that he had been saved by the Air Fairy. This entry specifically refers to an unused piece of art known as the Fall of Jaren card. In the eventually published card, Jaren is holding onto a ledge close to falling as Cass stands ominously in the foreground. However, the unused piece of art shows Jaren gravely wounded on his knees, having been stabbed during battle. This piece of art can still be found on the artist's DeviantArt with the description, "I never knew that the fall of Jaren was literal, so yeah, he was supposed to die by stab originally, but things changed. I swear." This leaves it kind of ambiguous to me whether this actually was the original plan for Jaren or not, or if this person is just joking. But either way, seeing unused art like this is pretty interesting. The Return of Dr. Sloth was a long-awaited plot that premiered in 2008. However, as I've mentioned before, it had been planned as far back as 2004, and for various reasons had to be replaced with the Hannah and the Ice Caves plot. Due to this, the plot that ended up on the site was different in a number of ways from the original, which we know thanks to Donna releasing some of her notes during the Reddit AMA. For example, in the original story, the Space Fairy was enslaved to Dr. Sloth, where in the released version, she was simply in another galaxy. As mentioned before, the Split Grundo storyline was also scrapped, though the purple-painted Neopets were still changed at the conclusion of the plot. Another interesting note is that while the plot was not published in 2004, some of the work they had done beforehand was released that year, like Gallery of Heroes entries for the characters and some tie-in flash games. Briefly mentioned before, the Darrigan Sword of Death, or DSOD, was a priceless Neopian Battle Dome item, a reward for completing the Champions of Meridel plot. Only one ever existed. It is believed to have been given to Feather Alley, and she was the only known holder for many years. During this time, Neopians speculated wildly about the amount of damage it dealt. There were some educated guesses made on Battlepedias and forums, but as the sword was locked up in one person's inventory, the true number was unknown. At one point, the sword was rumored to have been duplicated through some unknown means by someone who had never owned the sword. It is also widely repeated that Feather Alley sold the sword to user Petrowan for their Darrigan gallery, and they claimed that it did 4 earth damage. When I went to check their gallery for this video, though, I couldn't find the sword in there, so I don't even know. So much of this is just rumor and conjecture that, for me, it's just gonna remain a mystery. The video store was a shop like any other located in Neopia Central. It has been reported as a video rental store, but that's just not correct. The videos were for purchase like any other shop. There were no actual videos attached either, though there have been rumors about being able to watch flash cartoons connected to these videos for years. The store only lasted for a very brief window, maybe from late 1999 to mid-2000 or so. It was probably changed for the same reason as Neo NNN's, copyright. Many of the videos were plays on popular films like Indiana Jones, My Little Pony, and The Matrix. When the store was erased, the videos were all changed into books. The Darkest Fairy was an RPG released for the PlayStation 2 in 2005. There's a lot of cut content and cool beta stuff out there, as the game was originally announced for the PlayStation 1. The screenshots released to us then were blocky, polygonal, and truly horrible if I'm being honest. No official reason was ever given for the jump from PS1 to PS2, though a quick look at the graphics might give a clue. The promised features for the PS1 version seem to indicate an ambitious team with plans for minigames, pets, and of the eventually implemented 2 playable characters, although, as I mentioned before, one was changed entirely. The red Sally the Aisha seems to have been changed for some unknown reason to Roberta the Akara. It seems likely to me that given this ambition, the PlayStation 2 would just be able to better handle the game that they intended to make, though having to scrap the early development might account for some of the features being left behind, like the pet feeding. This is why you're here, right? This is why people sign up for these icebergs, is to hear about stuff like this. So one feature of Neopets is the beauty contest, where users can submit fan art of their Neopets. This fan art is then voted on by players, and 3 are selected as winners weekly. As with all user-submitted content, there is something of a danger here, and that danger was realized when a user submitted what this entry calls an NSFW anatomically correct usul. This appears to mean that it had the number of teats that you might expect for an animal based on, like, what's an usul supposed to be, like a squirrel? Anyway, while this piece of art actually did make it up for voting, the Neopets team deleted it pretty quickly, so few people got a look at it before it vanished forever. Thankfully, I'd imagine. When this iceberg was originally written, there were still a few unknown cooking pot recipes. As I said before, recipes are added to the cooking pot at random, and no one knows what they are until they are discovered through trial and error. Some of the recently discovered items include the Bun Witch and Solid Toast, the latter of which has been an unknown recipe since its release in 2000, although this is possibly due to a glitch. These discoveries were thanks to the hard work of those on the Cooking Pot subreddit and the Neopets Discord server. I believe, as of right now, that all cooking pot recipes have been discovered, but as they get added randomly, that could change at any time. This is a popular fan theory that seeks to explain just what exactly Dr. Sloth is. This theory posits that he is a literal sloth, perhaps maybe a mutant one, from our world. It's known that Dr. Sloth is not a Neopet, but what exactly he is unconfirmed. He's probably not a fairy because, as I mentioned, there are no male fairies, so the sloth thing just seeks to explain this. Support for this theory includes his feet, which look kind of like sloth talons, his Neopedia article claiming that he existed long before Neopets did, and the fact that, I guess sloths can grow algae, probably because they move so slow, turning them a funky shade of green. This is just a fun fan theory, but to be honest, I'm here for it. Sloth is a sloth. Let's go. On the Reddit, this entry refers explicitly to the fake rod of Dark Nova. The only info I can find about this is the Jelly Neo entry, which claims that only one person has ever owned this now extinct rod. I can't find any more info about it, such as where it came from, who owned it, or if there were even any other rods of this type. If you have any more concrete info on this, I would love to know. The Fairies Ruin was a pretty cool and popular little plot from 2010 which featured a number of characters, both old and new, from around Neopets. 2 of these, Xandra and Bren, were originally one character, jokingly called Brenandra by Snarky on her blog. However, due to the Neopets team aforementioned desire to give the antagonists strong motivations, they split the 2 characters in 2. This way, users could follow one character who sort of did the right thing, and one character who was motivated to do the right thing, but maybe in the wrong sort of way. I brought this up earlier in the iceberg, and Snarky has mentioned the Neopets Bible before. There are actually known to be 2 of them at Neopets HQ. A lore Bible, also called a show Bible, is a collection of history, characters, and plot continuity typically maintained throughout the run of a media property. Anything ever established in canon is put into a Bible and can be referenced later. Media such as games and animation often have visual rules laid out in their Bible as well. For example, Shoiru will never walk on all 4s, they always use 2 feet. That's just an example, I don't know this for sure. This kind of thing keeps the art and lore consistent over time. According to Snarky, there were 2 Neopets Bibles, one for lore and one for the site. Those 2 had different canons, as the lore of Neopets states there are no humans in Neopia, but obviously on the site, you and I exist. We take care of our pets. This goes back to the quad versus anthro debate that I mentioned earlier. The Neopets team seems to reconcile this by having one canon for the plots and events and one canon for the site. Snarky provided some samples from the Bible, which sometimes she had to condense for potential site buyers. These included tidbits like when to capitalize nouns like neg, pet species, and paint colors. Presumably, these Bibles still exist as Jumpstart purchased them and the servers they were housed on. This refers to a list that Donna left for the owners of Neopets when she left. This had a number of requests and a general idea about the direction of the site. We've never seen the list in full, but in the AMA she mentions that it included things like finishing Neoschools, updating the pound, and a Battle Dome revamp. Donna also said that she doesn't even know if anyone ever read the list. All news on the new feature page prior to the year 2000 were not archived, and so have mostly been lost to time. Because this was so early in Neopets' history and only encompasses a couple of months, very little contemporaneous information exists of the changes to the site at this time. Merry Acre Farms was a part of Neopets that featured, for lack of a better word, boring HTML games, like counting the number of potatoes on a page. Tower of Turnips was one of these. Users would stack turnips, trying to make the tallest tower possible. Players selected their row and placed a turnip on it. Then, if it did not fall over, they repeated the process. Less than a year after its appearance, the game was removed. Quote, "There was a big exploit with the Tower of Turnips earlier today that meant that people could get pretty much infinite Neopoints. Doh, we've removed the game from the site as it was flawed, and the people who exploited the bug have been frozen. As you shouldn't exploit bugs, it's rude." What exactly the exploit was is unclear, but it seems like it was a way to play the game very quickly, mitigating the boring factor and allowing people to farm Neopoints fast. The game was removed after only 276 days on the site and never returned. This refers to an unofficial Cards Against Humanity deck made by some former staff members of the Neopets team. Black cards includes cards like, "The Neopets team raised eyebrows with the new blank wearable," and "I just got the blank avatar from blank." The white cards were a lot more risque, with cards like Ogren Porn, a Fairy Grarl's Dick, and my Neopets Vagina. I'm gonna get demonetized on a Neopets video. This deck is actually still playable, and I'll leave a link in the description for those of you weirdos who want to see more. A long-desired sequel to the popular RPG games, NeoQuests 1 and 2. In 2006, an editorial in the Neopian Times said that it might be the next project after Tyranian Land War, which was never released. Whether or not this is a joke, I can't tell. It was also referenced in the Darkest Faerie trading card game expansion set on the Ixie plushie trading card, which said, "NeoQuest III featured the most unusual monsters." Its desirability, as well as its status as something of vaporware, has made it a Neopets meme akin to something like Half-Life 3, and it does seem that the Neopets team likes joking about it. For example, in issue 538 of the Neopian Times, the 2012 April Fool's issue, a number of joke articles were published. For example, an article was published that detailed strategies for using the new NeoQuest III charms, which were pay-to-win style Neocash charms, which is kind of an incredible idea for a spoofy article. There was also a skills and character guide and a guide to the boss battles of NeoQuest III. It seems unlikely that we'll ever see this game. I don't know if it was ever more than a joke or a hope in the hearts of Neopets players. Still, never say never, I guess. Neopets wasn't originally going to be a website. Originally, Neopets was conceived as a Java game. Some sources claimed it was supposed to be 3D, where you played as the Neopet and walked around and explored a virtual game world. Donna and Adam hired someone to work on prototypes and kind of get it running. This ended up taking longer than expected, so they began to work on a tie-in website. After a little while, with still very little progress made on the Java version, they scrapped it entirely and focused on the website. Their work and concepts for the games got turned into the lore for Neopets. According to Donna on the AMA, this is the reason for the messy confusion about Neopets having owners and being pets. Quote, "To be honest, the whole 'are you the Neopet or are you the owner' thing was always a bit awkward. We just didn't really think about it until the site was too big to really change it. I think we were too focused on adding new stuff to stop and think big picture about whether it was a fantasy world or a virtual pet site. It ended up being a weird cross between the two." So there you go. The non-canon reason for pets being like that is they just didn't plan it out very well. And that's it. This took me a long time to research and write because I wanted to make sure that I had all of the best, most accurate information for all of you, but even then, I had to skim the surface. As you can see, this video is so long. I actually originally went into a lot more detail on some of these entries, but it just dragged the video out longer. So if there are any of these that you'd like for me to turn into a full-length video, please let me know in the comments. I really hope that this ended up being worth the wait and there were a couple of things on here that you didn't know about. Let me know if there are anything on the iceberg that you think should have been on there, or if there was stuff that surprised you. And yeah, until next time, I hope you have a great day.